Good morning. It's a Michigan news story that captured the nation's attention, made numerous headlines, and left Michigan State University with a black eye. But now, an MSU museum exhibit chronicles the campus sexual abuse crisis while at the same time promotes healing and transformation. It's called Finding Our Voice, Sister Survivors Speak. No, it's not your typical Independence Day weekend spotlight, but it is a story about a courageous group of females who were determined to find their freedom against great odds. Our guests, Mark Auslander, Mary Warraw, and survivor Amanda Smith. It's Sunday, July the 7th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. Why is it important to have this particular exhibit on Michigan State University campus that involved a Michigan State University professor and story?
So we're all aware, everybody here at this museum, the whole team, all of our faculty are aware that we were the scene of the crime. We were the scene of the crime in many ways, and not only was the primary perpetrator here, but now we know, as has been extensively documented, that for many years, decades even, there was systematic institutional failure at MSU and of course other institutions, but especially here. So we all feel it's enormously important that this museum, the keeper of the repository of our history, of our aspirations, of our dreams as a university, also be involved in witnessing where we went wrong and how we can start to make things better. It absolutely has to happen right here in this museum.
How well has it been received by the public, and has it been a popular exhibit or one that people like, I don't think I can go in there?
A lot of people came, enormous numbers came to the opening. We had a special opening for the survivors and their families, and then a second opening for the general public. And there have been days it's been really, really crowded, other days kind of quiet. A lot of people explain that it is hard to walk in here. And there are many days that survivors will come sometimes with loved ones or best friends to walk through. So it's only been a month. Numbers are solid, but we expect they're going to go up as the word gets out more and more.
Overall, what do you hope this exhibit does?
So first and foremost, we're speaking to survivors of sexual violence everywhere to let them know that they're not alone, that this is a topic that can be talked about, that has to be addressed. Secondly, we're hoping that it educates everybody who's out there about the epidemic of sexual violence in our society, on American university campuses and elsewhere. So we want people to understand what are the causes. We were brought up thinking stranger danger, that the greatest danger that was out there, especially for children, was from strangers. And it turns out statistically, everybody needs to understand that there are many dangers close at hand, and we all have to be on the lookout and ready to believe survivors. We also want to communicate, and this is the most surprising part of the exhibit for us, is that this is a life-affirming story. Horrible, terrible things were done by one perpetrator. Collectively, many institutions, from the university to USA Gymnastics to many others, did drop the ball for a while. But the survivors have shown extraordinary strength and resilience and really brilliance and even, I would say, humor, surprisingly, sometimes in the face of all this adversity. And that's what comes across in this exhibition.
You really wanted buy-in from the entire community, correct?
Absolutely. When we began this exhibition project about a year ago, we knew it needed to be survivor-centered. We knew it needed to be about the experience of trauma, and all of us on the museum staff knew we didn't know how to make something ourselves that was survivor-centered. And it also occurred to us as we talked to so many of the sister survivors that what had been taken away from them was their voice. Sexual assault is the most horrific attack on our own right to author our stories. What do we have that's more fundamental? The only thing that we're born with into this world is our bodily integrity, and that's what's violated by a perpetrator of sexual assault. We can't make up for that, but one thing at least we can do is to sort of hand over the museum the tools of the museum world and say, we tell stories in museums. We tell stories through objects, we tell stories through words and images. Let's work together so that you can tell the story that you want to see told.
The teal ribbons that were tied around the trees. Talk a little bit about that and how you worked with the parents in preserving those particular ribbons and making sure that only the parents could touch them, I guess?
So going back a little bit in time into January 2018, it was a very dark period on this campus. Of course, the victim impact statements had just happened. They were overwhelming emotionally for everybody to hear. President Luana K. Simon had been essentially forced to resign. The perpetrator had been sentenced, but nobody knew what was coming next. And the only sort of spot of light then at that point were 228 ribbons that miraculously appeared over a few days across the campus. These were beautiful teal ribbons, teal being the color of it, internationally recognized as sexual assault awareness, and they were wrapped around campus trees with the names of the sister survivors, or in some cases their victim impact number. So at the museum, we knew these were treasured things. They were so valuable. That each tree had been dedicated to a survivor. And at first we were just watching, and then the word came down a few months later that the ribbons needed to be taken down. This was because they'd been infested with gypsy moths, actually, that had found them as a convenient place to lay their eggs. We're a natural science museum, so we were kind of interested in that, and we did want to, but we also realized it would be terrible to just let somebody tear them down and burn them. Each tree was a place where we had seen sister survivors, we'd seen their mothers, their parents going to pray and reflect, because there was nowhere to go on this campus. It was a scary campus to come back to for so many survivors, because it was the seat of the crime, and the one thing they had were those trees, were those ribbons. So we knew those had to be protected. So at the museum, we reached out to the Office of the President. We worked out a compromise between the parents who had put up those ribbons and landscape services, and everybody agreed. Only the mothers, only the parents, only the allies who had put up those trees, those tree ribbons, would get to untie those ribbons. And the museum staff is right there. We're able to bag the ribbons and make sure they were conserved and kept safe.
More from Mark Auslander right after this. You told me that you have a new president on campus, and this was his first stop when he came?
Pretty much. He was selected on Tuesday, and by Thursday, this is a couple weeks ago, President Stanley, our designated new president, visited the museum to see the exhibit. We were amazed. He spent 45 minutes going through absolutely everything, reading everything.
What did that say to you?
It felt like a wonderful new day. It's just, I mean, we already were so grateful for our acting president, Satish Udpa, who has been a great supporter, but to see the new president, the new permanent president coming in here, coming right here, it said he is deeply committed. He's committed to a reformation of the Title IX process. He's committed to transparency. He's not shying away from the hardest and most difficult stories. He knows he has a long road to go with the sister survivors of this particular crisis, of the Nassar crisis. He's also spoken indicating he's reaching out to survivors of all sexual violence on this campus and outside. This is, in a sense, the first stage. He knows. But it said to us he's forthright, he is serious about this. The fact that he's a medical doctor and a research scientist who is appalled at the violation of medical ethics, he said that again and again. That was really moving to the whole museum staff.
Have former Presidents Luana Simon and interim President John Engler walked through here?
Not to my knowledge. I don't think they've had an opportunity to come through.
Final question, do you feel as though those who go through this museum and just the presence of this museum has helped MSU heal and move on to the next stage of what everybody says is a great university with a long, rich history?
We are hoping that indeed that's what's going to happen, that this is part of a healing journey that a lot of us are going through. For me, the most sacred responsibility we have is to the sister survivors and their families themselves, who for so long felt betrayed by the school and felt that there wasn't a place for them. And to know that so many sister survivors worked so hard and put so much thought into this exhibit that they can see this is something we created, that alone is worth it to me. But for many of our students, for our faculty, for our staff, for our alumni, community members, every day it seems meaningful. I just talked to an elderly couple in their upper 70s who drove up here from Waco, Texas. They've been students 50 years ago. They've been following the whole story. And they said, this was a hard exhibit to go through, but it made us feel proud of our school. It made us feel like we were coming home again. And for me, that's the best thing you can hear as a museum director.
When Spotlight returns, we'll talk to the curator of textiles and social justice at the MSU Museum. We'll be right back. Mary, you were very much involved with the sister survivors in the concept and the design for this museum and this particular exhibit. How was that process? Take me sort of from start to finish.
Sure. So when we decided that we needed to do an exhibit, the correct way to do it was to involve the people whose stories we wanted to tell and to give them a place to share their voices.
To personalize it.
To personalize and to make sure it was done right, because it would have been off if we would have decided to be academics and take a historical approach and just do our newspaper research and that type of thing. We needed to really make sure, again, that the voices of the people whose stories were being told were a part of the process.
How do you do that with that many people? Was it
Sure.
just a core group?
It was a core group that we worked with, and we had regular meetings where we got together, and we had to do a lot of sitting back and listening, because that was important, again, because that was the right way to develop this exhibit.
Give me some examples of stuff that people will see in the museum that you had to work with them in curating and designing, and that hopefully a message comes across.
Sure. So one of the aspects of the exhibit is a timeline, because this crisis goes back decades, and it was really important for our committee that we tell that timeline part of the story, and people can see how many years things were happening. And they made sure we were also aware of that there were multiple institutional failures that led to how long things continued. So but seeing the timeline and seeing the 3 threads of institutional responsibility that go throughout that timeline, that's one thing that visitors will see and can take in the impact of that.
You know, one of the things that hit me was the wall where it shows the different emotions that they went through.
Mm-hmm. So,
and are still.
Yes. There is a part of the exhibit where we're presenting what is called a trauma cloud, where it's all the PTSD symptoms that the sister survivors have experienced, and they do continue to experience. So we created a presentation of the words of all those physical and emotional things that have happened, and we needed to, again, present them in a way that would have an impact on the visitor. So we had an amazing exhibit designer who was able to listen to what needed to be included, but then to conceptualize and create a really effective piece to bring that forth to the visitor.
Your background is in textiles and quilts and
Yes.
all sorts of other things. You're actually very close to perhaps your favorite part of the exhibit. Tell us about it.
Yes. So one of the pieces, and I do love anything textile related, is a very colorful 3-dimensional butterfly dress created by Alexandra Bork, who's one of the sister survivors, where when the sentencing and all of that was happening, she was cutting out butterflies of hand-dyed silk and assembled them into a dress, and she has talked with us about the symbolism of a butterfly and what the butterfly means to her and why she chose a butterfly, and also about the process of how cutting those out and creating those butterflies were part of her process. So she assembled those into a dress. It's an elevated dress because she also was impacted by Judge Aquilina's statement about the women growing to 10 feet high, so it's presented raised. And another aspect of it that I am really intrigued with is it's this beautiful, beautiful dress, but the mannequin that it's on that she chose is a mannequin that has some fracturing in it, and there's a practical dressmaking reason why those types of mannequins exist. But in this case, because this was such a violation of the body, I find it fascinating that it has a fractured body with the beautiful dress on top of it. But also important with the dress was something that the committee, again, told us needed to be a part of this exhibit, and that she agreed to make a part of her artwork, which there's a shadow emerging from the dress of a crouched girl, and it was important to convey the sense of what survivors continue to go through, because some days to the outside world you might look like this beautiful dress, but other days, or at the same time even, you're that crouched shadowed figure. And it was really important that visitors get that interplay and see that, to see a visual reflection of the lifelong impact of sexual assault.
Coming up on this special spotlight, Amanda Smith, a sister survivor advocate. Amanda, talk to me about the wall behind you and what it means to you.
It means a lot. There's a few different feelings. At first, it was kind of a wow moment when we saw all of them, and I helped create some of them. So when we were making them, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, there are this many. Each tile represents a girl that was abused. That's a lot of girls.
That's a lot.
The number kind of kept growing while we were in the process of doing this. And
over 500.
Yeah, so in statements, the only public girls the number was about 175 at the first statements. And then to find out it kept growing and growing after that, now up to over 500 is just amazing. Sad, but at least it's known now.
Your picture is on the wall. You were how old there?
I was 12.
How old were you when you first started gymnastics?
3.
And how long did you do it?
Until I was 13.
You have a daughter. Would you let her do it?
That is something my daughter really wants to do gymnastics. She's 5, and at first, when she first piqued interest, it was right in the middle of statements, and it was a definite no. There was no way I was letting my daughter do gymnastics anywhere ever. It was just not something that I could envision. Looking back on it now, I think it was more myself. I couldn't envision walking back into a gym, watching my daughter put on a leotard, watching my daughter get coached. It was more of a me issue than a her. And now there are great gyms that coach respectfully, and I would put her in one of those gyms. But the gym that I went to, I would never, ever put her there, ever.
What does this exhibit mean to you, and what do you hope the world gets out of this?
For me, it's just making this sexual abuse a non-taboo topic, making it something that people are okay with speaking about, because it wasn't for so long. It's still very hard to talk about, and I want not just survivors of sexual abuse in athletics, I want survivors everywhere to know that they're heard. My statement in court was my first kind of finding my voice, but the process of putting this exhibit together with the curators and the museum team really, really helped me find a voice. I was pretty meek and mild. I didn't really tell anybody about this side of my life up until then. And this past year working on this exhibit has really made it so that I feel comfortable. This is a safe place to talk about it.
You feel stronger?
Yes, so much.
You worked closely with the staff of the museum, along with some of the other core group of the surviving sisters. Do you feel as though they heard all of you and heard you well?
Yes, I think I came into the curating process a little later, because at first when I was approached, I said no. I did not trust MSU. I wasn't going to put any hope in MSU, because at that time we were still dealing with the administration kind of going back and forth with us and saying we were lying about things, and I had no faith. So I said no at first, and then one of the girls who was on the co-curating committee, she had lunch with me and said, listen, it's not what you think it is. It's a safe place. They're really working for what we want.
Do you feel having this at MSU is the right place for it?
Yes.
Why?
What better place to pay homage to everything that occurred than, ground zero of where it occurred.
Larry Nassar's name is not mentioned in this exhibit.
It is not.
Why?
It's not about him. This happened because of him, but it's not about him, and that took a long time for me to figure out. This exhibit is really based on, we start out seeing where things went wrong. Obviously, he's ground zero. He started by being a predator, but then people covered it up for him. And then as you work your way around the exhibit, you kind of see, at least for me, you get the sense of, girls finding voices, finding strength, really dredging through it to get to where we are now.
You've gone through a lot.
Yeah.
You've put your life back together in many respects. You have a husband, you have children, you're building a house.
Yeah.
All the things that people would say, perfect American dream. How have you done it, and what do you see ahead for you and your family?
There were a lot of breakdowns. There a lot of counseling. Therapy weekly. It helps. Talking about it helps. But in the beginning, it was not puppy dogs and rainbows. Looking at us from the outside, my husband and I and our family, we look like just the normal white picket fence family, but there's so many just demons that I was dealing with throughout this last year and a half that were very life-altering for me. My kids didn't have the best mom at times, and that, looking back, is probably like my biggest regret, is not being able to fully be myself and fully take care of my family. It's hard for a mom to see her kids like living life and being so joyful and happy and feeling so down about yourself and your life that you can't feel that with your kids, because kids are the most innocent form of joy. And it's taken a lot to get where I am now, and I'm loving it. I'm loving being an advocate for girls, boys, everybody. I just want to be able to make the future that my kids are going to live in a little bit better.
The Finding Our Voice Sister Survivors Speak exhibit is open to the public at the MSU Museum in East Lansing until April 2020. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.